Hey, welcome back to another episode of Resenha COSMICA podcast. I am Prajwal and this is our sixth episode. In the previous episodes, we discussed some interesting topics in physics with amazing guests. And in this episode, we have tried to do something different. We'll be discussing about post-truth with amazing guest, Professor Ernani Rodrigues. Professor Hernani Rodrigues is a professor of physics education at UFES, Brazil. He did his PhD from University of Sao Paulo in 2020. He also had a visiting time at University of California, Berkeley from 18 to 19. So he basically works in the areas of physics education, but he keeps a keen interest in this area of post-truth. He also gave a recent talk and also a mini course here, from which I was inspired to bring him in our podcast and discuss this in more detail. So I hope you all guys will enjoy this podcast.
Okay, we start.
Yep.
So, as we know, truth has become very essential at the present times more than ever because we are living in the age of wars. We have AI, extensive use of social media, and I think to talk about post-truth, first I think we need to see what something about truth. And what led to post-truth from a historical context, if you wish. So, can you tell us about what historically, maybe give us a context of the truth
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how post-truth came into
Sure, sure. So thank you guys for inviting me for this conversation. Thank you, William. Thank you, Prajwal. Um, through truth has been playing a major interest in philosophical thinking, and there's several ways for defining truth. Maybe we could narrow in three ways of making the concept of truth. One is the truth should be some sort of correspondence between what is said, I mean, in terms of words and phrases and utterances, and what is verifying in the world. So this kind of correspondence is a very, very Aristotelian way of defining truth. And if you say something that is, and you check on the world, the physical, the real world, and the thing is real there,
Mhm.
so that should be truth. But at the same time, this is not the only way for defining truth because it's the very, very realistic way, a very attached to the natural state of things in the world, but considering society, considering religion, considering other kinds of realities, not only the physical one, truth should have another way of being defined. And another way of defining truth is taking truth as a coherence. If you have an utterance, if you say something, and this is coherent to a set of things that are accepted, that should be truth as well. But this is another way of defining truth. And this second way of defining truth is important not only for beliefs, not only for religious realm, but also for some part of science that we cannot assess in the reality. So we have this set of axioms and pre-established truth, and we make statements according to this system, and that should be truth. Math evolved pretty much this way by coherence, not by correspondence. And the third dimension of truth, it should be the pragmatic idea of truth. The pragmatic definition of truth comes from the pragmatic philosophers from the past century, the beginning of the past century. And if something works, that should be truth. It doesn't matter pretty much what is behind that. If it works, and then it's truth. And it's very, very important for engineering, for optimization of processes and um, other scenarios when you're not interested in problematizing the truth, the fact. You only accept that if it's working, then it's truth. So considering these three ways of defining truth, I think um, I think that we can understand a little bit that it's possible to using only true for um, for saying something that is not true. And it's weird, but it's real, because if you are on a coherent system, a system of beliefs, and you can take facts that on this coherent way of defining truth is true, but it can't get assessed in the real world. And maybe it doesn't work. So it's not pragmatic, it's not true in terms of pragmaticity, it's not true in terms of correspondence, but it's true in terms of coherence. And, and mostly natural sciences from the past 200-300 years um, has evolved understanding truth as only the correspondent way of truth. The whole Enlightenment era, the whole science from the 17th and 18th centuries, it has this primacy of correspondence. But then some fields of quantum mechanics, some meta science, some sciences like complexity sciences and, let's say, network sciences, they are sciences that they don't actually. I mean, let's think about ecology. Can we really look at the nature and see um, a niche visually? We can't. We only can, in maybe 2, 3, 4 foldings, we can say that, okay, this is a niche, this is a species, this is ecosystem. All those system levels sciences, they cannot access the phenomena directly in nature. So they should make truth more in a coherent way. And they gather evidence in that way, and then unfolding 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of coherent truth, we can find some evidence on the correspondent way of defining truth. So I think it's important, really, at least being acknowledged about those different kind of truth, for maybe talking a little bit about post-truth.
Yeah, it's interesting how you brought up a few science examples as well, like quantum mechanics and so on, which we
Oh,
study. I mean, not quantum mechanics exactly, but still, I think we can relate to what you are speaking. There is a difference between what is coherent and what is correspondence truth. And you also mentioned pragmatic truth. So, truth was, I think, still pretty much easy to say what truth should be historically.
yeah.
But it's not very straightforward to say what a lie should be or what is not truth,
Yes.
because it could be from ignorance, it could be straightforward lie,
Hmm.
or you could have much more complicated versions of it. So so what should be a lie, like what is not truth then?
Yeah. So, well, it depending, it depends uh, on how you are working with the truth, because on the correspondence, it's easier to say that if you say something, it's right, and it's not right on the real physical world, it's not true. But on the coherent, it accepts some some confusion between what is pretty much coherent and what is not. And that kind of confusion, it can drive some one's thinking in order to believe that something is true, because you are looking at very, very close relation, a very, very ad hoc coherence, but considering the whole system, it's not true. I was thinking about an example in a very, very basic undergrad physics, when I have a student once that he came to me with this that is pretty much ingenuous, innocent, but it's not untrue properly, because he just took the 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 dielectric force equation, which has a K, like K, QQ, and distance, square distance. And then he just put on the other side the elastic force equation, which has another K. And why not should he cancel the K and have another physical law here? And I was, okay, I mean, point to point in a close relation, you are not wrong because they are same letters, but consider the whole system of knowledge, they are very distant concepts, and they are not true because you cannot just mix them up just because they have this superficial relation. They have more deeper meaning on this K, on that K. I took that example because it happened to me in one classes in my previous years, but we can we can prospect from this example how people tend to, especially if they are not into science, how they try to make this ad hoc relation, and then they can find some local superficial truth, coherent truth, but not coherent in the whole system of beliefs and of previous truth that is accepted in science. So I think this is a sort of a micro example for the big problem that we have for defining what is a lie
Yep.
in a system of coherence.
Yep. I think we can talk a lot about physics things. What like objectively can we actually know the truths in science? Is science how science gives us freedom or an approach to actually find evidences for believing in some truths. But now stepping into post-truth, so can you give us historical context?
Yes.
Where?
Well, first, if you just take a look on the recent, I say 4 years ago, 5 years ago, special numbers, special issues in some academic journals, especially in philosophy and if in science education, there are some special issues discussing the concept of post-truth. Why was that? Because we have in Brazil the Brazilian notebook of physics education. It's the name of the journal, and also in this Oxford journal, Science and Education. There was in 2020 and then 2022 two special numbers, special issues on post-truth and on why should we trust in science. And I, of course, recommend to anybody to take a look on those special issues. But why was that during this time in history? Because pre-pandemic and pandemic times, they were marked by this extensive use of social networks that you just mentioned before. And it was a time that science was under attack in an unprecedented way. I mean, on my view, I haven't seen anything like that before. Maybe we had another other eras like that, like the Cold War and like the times from from the big dynasties and big empires. Maybe there was some kind of attack in science, but on my time here, I haven't seen anything like that because regular people that has nothing to do with science in their daily lives, they start to become let's say brave against science because suddenly the idea of scientists are not concerned about truth, they are only concerned about politics. It was and pretty much accusing scientists of being leftists and taking a side on the political debate. And that was the first time that I saw this happening. And it was not only me, because colleagues around the world, they were seeing the same sort of social phenomenon increasing society. And if we draw back a little bit on time, we will find the idea of post-truth taking place in political agenda in at least three or four major events. One of those were on the Brexit case because people had strong beliefs in in, in their in strong beliefs that the rupture they were supporting was the right thing to do because otherwise they will be signing up with some ideology that they did not agree with. And the other one was the Trump's election in 2016. And we saw the same phenomenon in Brazil in 2018 with our former president election. What is common between those political movements? That the facts, the actual facts, they were not the main foundation of the argument, and it was made intentionally. So once you can get people's perception and people's emotion on some phenomena, then you can convince them to sign up some political agenda. And this is the case of the post-truth, because when you define truth, facts are, I mean, we can even question facts if they really exist or not, but they are always there, and they are the eye of the hurricane. We are always trying to surround the fact, or arguing using the facts, or taking the fact as the main foundation of the point we are trying to make. In post-truth is defined by the situations where facts, I mean, actual facts, are less important than feelings and beliefs and perceptions. I mean, individual perception, not collective perception, in order to form the collective opinion.
Public opinion.
Yes.
I think it's I think it's an important point to make is the drivers of people's distrust in facts, because I think you would find a lot of people who disagree with facts and who might also express the same sentiment that
Mhm.
facts are more important than feelings, even though they're perhaps not placing the same importance on facts as someone else. How does that work within?
Wow. Yeah. It didn't start during the from 2015 on.
Mm.
From 2015 on, the new element, the new variable, was the social network, because then you can cast information that is fact free. But I mean, I'm coming back to 2015, 16. But if you come back to the rising of the sociology of science, let's say by the end of the 70s and during the 80s, there was this science wars that put the natural science and the social science in opposition. Uh, I would point to the works from Bruno Latour, this French philosopher, as one person that um, he tried to make a study on the mostly I'd say anthropology of science, like how the scientists they make a small human community, and how they share rituals, and how they can um, produce a sort of a culture, and sort of a language that they speak among themselves and they understand themselves. And at some at some situations, you learn how to be a scientist pretty much more by participating on that, instead of making a pure study of a scientific theme. And when Latour came with this book, by the 80s, there was a very very people got mad on him because people say that that shouldn't be true because science is pure and we study only the concepts. And he was trying to point up that in every human set, you will have this sort of cultural production. And that doesn't make science less science. It, it just makes us to understand how more close to publish a huge paper you are if you are in a big lab, because this is a community and you know the editors and you have lunch with the main editor, and you are closer to that because you are participating on that. And if you are in a small lab in a developing country, that will be harder to make a big paper to appear in Science, Nature, PNAS, and other journals like that. So, and then some sort of science wars became, and I don't know if you guys are aware of the so-called hawks.
I haven't heard of it, no.
There's this guy, this mathematician and physicist, because the social papers, which is I think that the name of the journal was the Social Papers, they put up this special issue in the 80s, 90s, and they were trying to open the discussion on the science wars. And uh, Alan Sokal, this guy, he just put up a nonsense paper on hermeneutics of gravitation, and I mean it was a nonsense paper. It was a hoax, and the paper got accepted. And he was making his point on, you see, uh, you guys on social sciences that say that science it's on a social effect, you cannot even filtering some some nonsense paper like this one. And this is very important because I personally I don't think that that was the case that Bruno Latour was putting up. But when you question science from the inside, you have this problem that at some point some weird work just passed by the editor and the reviewers, and the paper just came out. But that happened through the history, and then luckily we can review the papers, we can I mean retrieve the papers and playing the game of science. Why am I talking about that? Because in 2018, the New York Timers, the New York Times, they interviewed Bruno Latour, and they said on the cover, "We interviewed the post-truth philosopher," because they were pointing that maybe the 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 war that Bruno Latour opened in the 80s was the opening gate for the post-truth. And then Bruno Latour says that that was not the case. What he's trying to say was that we are not pure. Science is not pure. There always this political dimension and the cultural dimension of science. It's a nice interview for reading as well. So back to the 2016, maybe one of the main example of post-truth is an interviewing that the former lower house speaker in US was giving to the television, and the interviewer um, say that US was safer, the crimes were decreasing, and he say the crime wasn't decreasing, and they start to debate, and she shows numbers and facts about that, and the guy on the other side say, as a politician, I would stick with what people feel, and I will leave the theory for you guys. So he totally throw the facts away, and he called that just a theory, and that that those facts could be presented with alternative facts.
Yeah, people usually come up with this the presenting the other side of the story
Yeah.
approach in the journal in the news.
Which is always good for the debate,
Yeah,
but there's no such a thing as alternative facts. There is the fact, and we can have alternative views on the fact, but we agree on the fact.
yeah.
There was a hurricane in Florida yesterday. Okay, one can say that with a class 6, another can say that this is not even a hurricane. And we can debate the fact, but we always agree it's sort of a social contract. We are agreeing with the fact, let's debate the different visions of the fact. In post truth, facts are not the main relevant uh, variable. Feelings, beliefs are the most relevant variables. And they discovered that people tend to vote in politicians according more with their beliefs and ideology and feelings than to some factual set of information. And that make um, new presidents in Europe, in America, and in the whole world, especially driven by information spread on social networks, mostly the closed ones, those huge groups on WhatsApp, on Facebook, when people make those bubbles of their own beliefs and only have peers that share the same belief, so they feel free to attack the other side and they don't have a counterpoint, and that just reinforces the idea of post-truth. And then suddenly, because fake news are not necessary the post-truth. Fake news are really, really attached to the post-truth, but fake news are information news-like. It's like a headline, a missing headline or misleading headline, or a headline that quite is not right, or those are sort of fake news. And there are also the totally scam, like putting up an edited photo for someone in some place that he was not there. So this is a factual lie. And there are the fake news that take those kind of lies and present that as a journal, as a newspaper news. And there is the post-truth, which is much more, okay, this is a thing on the post-truth. The fake news plays a role in post-truth, but even a scientific paper can play a role on post-truth. Because if someone just bring up a paper saying that vaccines causes autism, and that was an actual paper on that, it was published in one of the biggest medicine journal in the world. It was published on the Lancet, and the guy was affirming that vaccines caused autism. And then years later, one journalist, one investigative journalist, he found out that the guy has a huge conflict of interest, and he was working with some pharmaceuticals, and the kind of data he was using was only phone calls with a dozen of parents, and he made a point that published a paper on the Lancet. And then 12 years later, more than a decade later, the paper was retrieved. But through a whole decade, people was hesitating to vaccinate their child their children, because the possibility of causing autism in their family. And then after, like I say, more than a decade, the paper was retrieved, but the measles became endemic in UK again because of the hesitance of vaccinating children. So this is pretty much the post-truth case, because it's not a lie. There was a scientific publication, but underlying the research has problems. And for us that we are reading, and I mean, I from time to time I check to the Retractor Watching, which is a website for retracted papers. Okay, and it's regular. I don't think a scientific career will go down if you have a paper retracted. Of course, we don't want that. We will be we will be very, very diligent, and we are trying to make our best for making our papers some contribution, not some sort of result that will be questioned inside, I mean, on the core, that makes the paper retracted. But it can happen. It can happen. But not when it happens as a fraud, just like those worst cases, the consequences of the paper being outside, it get worse from every day the paper is still out, because people used to rely on those papers for making their own beliefs factual, even though the papers are not factual. So that is an issue.
I think there could be.
I think a very similar thing happened with the ivermectin medicine right during the pandemic.
Totally, totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which was a medicine for like bugs. And people start to drink that as a solution for the infection. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. During coronavirus, back in India as well, even the minister promoted a homeopathic alternative. Not it was not even homeopathic. Some religious
Wow.
guru and a union minister, the central minister promoted this medicine.
In India.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
in
now-
Brazil, we have our minister, health minister. He got COVID. One of the ministers, because it changed through the time. We were talking yesterday, and that I thought about the education minister that changed 5 times, but the health minister also changed. And there was one time he was sick from the COVID, and the president made a live with him, presenting the ivermectin as a solution for his infection, and that was like, I mean, dozen of million of people watching that and taking that as scientific truth. This is the case of the post-truth. Agora, now, what is behind that? Um, in the book of post-truth published by Lee McIntyre, he poses that post-truth has either an ideological or an economical agenda. So we can maybe think about the cases where some prominent figures that has millions of viewers online, why are they ignoring facts and just bringing some elements for getting the feelings? There is an ideological or and an economical agenda behind that.
I think you clearly put this into these categories like ideological or economical, because even in science, physics papers, I think recently also we see a lot of theory of everything papers, and also
But
recently.
is that economical or ideological?
Well, some people have personal motives on publishing more, so they come up with the theories which I don't know. There is a class. They make their own class of groups who repeatedly cite each other, which the science doesn't go anywhere. You're simply citing each other, and
Yeah, or maybe the salami science, right?
yeah.
Take small slices and then just yeah for publishing.
I think it gets even worse than that. I know there's a large problem in China where it's very important for young doctors to be publishing to earn promotions and things, and you now have the existence of paper mills, huge factories which produce falsified studies, falsified research for the doctors to publish. And some of the, I know I was, some of the things that you get out of it are quite humorous almost. Like, I'm gonna cut this out because I can't remember.
I think I remember a few papers from superconductivity as well.
Oh, but that case on Nature was really serious because the guy didn't disclose the data. I've been following this case, this particular case, because I work closely with the guy here that worked with in condensed matter, and he was, oh gosh, I knew it was not true.
Recently, the last year physics Nobel laureate mentioned gave a seminar denying climate change, which is also a post-truth thing. Nobel laureates coming up, he is just what he's trying to say is, okay, there are some parameters in climate physics which are not clearly defined, and we need to know more about it. That's one way of saying it.
Which is natural in science.
Yeah.
We always are looking for some more solid background for our assumptions. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
When it comes from people like who who have the position to actually influence people who study science, do science, inspire other people, then I think it gets a little.
Yeah, but regarding climate change, I think it's one of the main issues in post-truth. Even the book we've been reading for doing this conversation. Um, well, but again, there's either an ideological or an economical agenda, because just for citing some names, not from people but from corporations, um, the work of from Naomi Oreskes. She is a researcher at the UCLA, and he came up with this book in 2010, I believe, with his colleague, called "The Merchants of Doubt." And what the Merchants of Doubt do, they they they've been casting doubt on scientific results from decades. And it always started with the case of the tobacco during the 50s and the 60s, because the industry of tobacco was huge. And some doctors, they have found that a relation between tobacco consumption and lung cancers. And then quickly the tobacco industry, they founded the Tobacco Industry Research Committee for hiring doctors and researchers for presenting alternative research, because they knew that there was a problem. They couldn't say that my cigarette is better than your cigarette, because they could fight each other, and that is not good, was not good for the industry. So let's say there is a problem of cancer, but we cannot say that the cause is the tobacco. At least, just a quick one. Um, I was in US talking with a good friend. She's a researcher as well, and she said that during the 60s there was this conversation that lung, because they allowed people to smoke inside the planes, but the risk of the cancer wouldn't be anything compared to the risk of some meson P or meson me uh, crossing your body, because that is ionizing your fluids, and that may cancer to you. And if you're like 40,000 feet above, you're more exposed to the cosmic rays. And I was, oh my God. And you see, people always try to get anything to grasp on in order to sustain their assumptions. But when people outside science start to grasping anything for criticizing science, this is just not science, and this is just not how science works. So, well, I mean, the case of the tobacco, later on, 1998, the tobacco industry were condemned to pay more than 200 billions of dollars because of the decades of fraud they have been publishing. The Tobacco Research Committee was closed, and they agreed, they signed a confession, and they accepted to pay more than 200 billions of dollars. I mean, this is almost the size of, I don't know, Apple, and then something like that. Not now, but
Yeah.
yeah,
But this was in 90s, no?
98,
Yeah.
1998. And but some of the heads that was on this think tank, I mean, by think tank, I mean a group of people that really knows how media works, and he really know how to influence the public opinion. I mean, Cambridge Analytica is a think tank, but the Marshall Institute, which is a think tank, really after the closing of the tobacco committee, they start to work with oil companies, and they founded some institute just like the Heartland Institute. And the Heartland Institute, which is still on, they publish every year the NIPCC. When the IPCC report come out at some point, they publish the and IPCC. What I mean by the IPCC is Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. The other one is the non-governmental panel for climate change. And if you have new data here, the guys here, they publish alternative data, which is really damaging to the public opinion, because public opinion think that scientists are in a disagreement about climate change, about anthropic causes of climate change. But science is not, especially from 2021 on, when NASA started to coming out with papers from direct observation from satellites, comparing the greenhouse gases concentration and the floating of um, Earth temperature, and they are that data that goes really correlated, especially during the pandemics when people start to lock down, and then the greenhouse effects deaccelerated and the temperature anomaly deaccelerated together. So there were models from that for that since the 80s, but they were atmospherical models. And every time the Heartland Institute and other think tanks for denying the anthropic causes of climate change, they point out, okay, this is just a mathematical model. It doesn't reflect the reality. It doesn't reflect the atmosphere. But now the direct observation are confirming that model. Not only the model from the scientists that published that on Geophysical Science Journal in 86, I believe, but also the model that ExxonMobil, the oil company, they have internally. And there was a hearing on US House, on US Senate, and they brought this data together, and they show up the data that they knew from models since the 82, maybe 81, 82, that the concentration of greenhouse gases, it increasing very similar to the Earth temperature. That disclosed that they knew 40 years ago about the issue. And then the guy published that. And now we have direct observation that the gases, because if climate change denial, the strategy of climate change denial is not denying the change, it's denying the cause. Okay, the climate change, but this is a natural cycle because the planet has different movements. Some of them, they have period of 1 year, of course, a lot of them, period of hundreds of years, thousands of years. This is only a natural cycle, but this is not. This is unprecedented. If you look from industrialization of the world on, the floating of the temperature is not regular. It's really something anomalous. And now from direct observation, it was only after the direct observation that IPCC, and they got the Nobel Prize, not this year, but 2 years ago, from that, and there's a Brazilian researcher on that. He was lecturing here at the campus 2 years ago, and we don't have any Nobel Prize here in Brazil, in Brazilian with Nobel Prize, but we have this guy on IPCC that got the prize, among others. So only after that, now they say it is, the word they use is unequivocally anthropic. There's no questioning about that. So, but the deniers, they just, some of them, they are scientists criticizing results. This is natural. This is expected, and this is health. This is healthy for science. Some of them, they just say, well, this is not the case, this is not the cause, but they don't present any data, any study. And there was this systematic review on the book that I mentioned, The Merchants of Doubt, from Naomi Oreskes. She presents a couple of systematic reviews on causes of climate change in scientific production. One review was made by, let's say, 10,000 papers, 12, 13 papers, like 0.00000%, um, not pointing the anthropic cause. And a couple other reviews, even bigger, same results. But asking people in US, only a third of people think that scientists agree about climate change being anthropic. Two-thirds, like 66% of people in US, they don't believe scientists agree with that. Even though if you make a systematic review with dozens of thousands of papers, all of them will point out some gases caused by humans. And I'm talking about some data from more than a decade ago. Right now, I think that will be even bigger, but the public opinion is still thinking that scientists disagree. Just the same strategy that tobacco industry did during the 40s, the 50s and the 60s. And at the same kind of strategy, also evolution deniers. There's in Brazil a guy, I'm not naming him because I'm not giving him the microphone, but there's this guy in Brazil. He's a religious guy. I have nothing against religion. I think religion is a wonderful cultural effect of, and you can find religiosity in any human gathering during the whole history. People that never get together, they have their own religiously beliefs, and that's fine. I'm not the guy that will fight religion, never. Uh, but there's this guy in Brazil. He he uses the very same strategy because he's a physicist. He has his master degrees in some U.S. university, and I took a look on his master thesis that he defended in '88, I believe. He has only one paper during his whole life, um, using X-ray for looking at some chromosomes. And okay, that's fine. That's fine. Diffractions and reflections of X-ray. That this is what people in physics they do. They shoot X-ray and then infer the internal structure. That's fine. But this guy, he's very famous in Brazil, and he travels the whole country giving lectures, making the creationism a scientific idea. Why is that problematic? Because people that believe in creation, um, they are attached to a system of beliefs, a system of knowledge that is pretty much biblical, and inside some religious set of beliefs, and that's fine. But when you try to bring data for that, it's hard to find data that supports the, the, the belief of the creation. And this guy, he also doesn't present any data from that and any research from that, any nothing from that, but he questioning the scales of analysis from biologists that work with evolution. He says, are you really trying to convince me that if I put inside a truck gas, flour, yeast, and then the truck just crash and you have a cake? This is just impossible. So life couldn't be created only by chance. It has to be some intelligent design behind that. And he uses the very famous idea of intelligent design for proposing that creation is scientific. You can see his lecture title is like is something like scientific scientific creation, creational theory, which is not scientific, of course. Why is that problematic? Because they are the same groups that share. He published lots of books, not in academic editors, publishers, but a lot of books, and people read his books, and people only questioning without presenting a counter data for that. This is the classic case of attacking science from outside, from a different epistemology, because science has a way of validating the knowledge really different than this kind of belief validate the truth, for example. So, and this is very problematic, and I like to look at this case as a also on a classic example of post-truth. The idea, I mean, if someone feeling feel that life couldn't be created by chance, and of course, he has a good point on the truck example, but making the truck crashing zillions of time per second during 13 billions of years, there's a real chance that you have a cake, of course. But he changes the scale of analysis for making his point. And this is a very, very clever way because he knows physics. He's a physicist. And he, those are the kind of people that, in my opinion, they are the worst for science because they know from inside how science works and they build that scientific-like narrative, which is not science.
I think in some way it's quite similar to the kind of false equivalence example that you gave at the start, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there are two things. One is why it is easy to sell people such things. Why do people buy these things so easily? What? Why is it not hard to convince facts to people? That is one thing. On the other hand, even I think we people who do science also has the responsibility in conveying things correctly. Usually in science popular talks, usually people become really honest but vague honest in a way that of course we don't know how the universe began. So people may think, okay, so you don't have a proof of scientific proof of how the universe began. So we should be clear of what we do. I think people should mention a little bit about how the science as a method works, as a procedure works. It's not like building coming up of theory. So on the first hand, like why is it easy to convince people, and why is it hard to bring these people back to reality, to the facts?
Okay. Well, this is a major concern from science educator as me, because different from you guys, I'm not a researcher on physics itself. I'm a researcher on physics education, and scientific literacy is a huge thing on science education field right now, because in the first half of the past century, we educators, we thought that the good way of promoting scientific literacy was making kids and teenagers and youngsters as little scientists. And in the whole world, there was movements for building little scientists. And then we educators, we discovered that, okay, this is a little bit naive because we cannot be a small scientist if we are not producing science. But what is the main, the key aspect that we should bring to the schools in order to bring people to science? They talk about epistemic practices, which are the skill of arguing upon supports and using evidence for supporting the argument. So the development of argumentation skills is one of the practices that we are trying to implement in basic schooling for for not for not making a next generation of citizens that can only bite any kind of bite they put to them. And they can questioning the argument, also not questioning the results. Because there is this guy, this philosopher, his name is Stephen Tumming. The book he's not mentioned, but he's a guy that has a book called The Uses of Argument. And on his book, he present the argument as a logical structure. When you have the claim, when you have the warranties, and you have the conclusion, for making it simple, just 3 points. And you cannot only attack the conclusion. If you want to attack an argument, you need to understand what kind of claim is made and how the warranties are attached to the claim for producing that conclusion. And argumentation is a big thing on scientific literacy. Another thing is sorting truthful source of information. It's okay you have some laughings on TikToks and Instagram Reels video, even those that question science and having fun with that, but are those the truthful source of information for building your own opinion on a relevant matter, on a socially relevant matter? Maybe not. But at the same time, lay people um, are not on the daily matter reading scientific papers. So the scientific papers are not truthful source for them as well. So what is the sweet spot for reading understandable and at the same time trustful information for building a public opinion? And another thing that scientific literacy uses in classroom, it's not only bringing physics experiment to classroom, but it's from from a natural event, how can I build knowledge about that? So the idea of teaching physics in classrooms, basic classrooms right now, in several countries, not only in Brazil, but also in Europe and in other places, was that how can we help students to building knowledge that is logically structured, that has that take care of the facts, and that can produces a coherent narrative on that. And if you look at that, those three kind of truth they take place on the scientific literacy. And but this is a very hard to to make happen in classrooms. But I think it's very worthy. There are also social dynamics that can be brought to the classroom, like some kind of jury when people defend different sides, especially when you are not affiliated to one fact, so you are defending the fact. And when you are very affiliated to a fact, you should defending the other fact. So you play the counterpart in order to training your ability of using evidence for supporting some argument. And this is one of the epistemic practices that are very important to youngsters in schools. And then they might conceive science not as a book of facts, not as a book of results, but as a way of producing analysis of the world, of the facts, of the surroundings. And yes, this is a very important thing. And I believe the only way for fighting the, the deniers and the post-truthers is educating people accordingly in order that people can have the ability of filtering what is behind and what is fact-free and what is really attached to facts when they are making their own decisions and their own beliefs about nature, about pandemics, about evolution, about whatever they want to believe. But they know that scientifically, I cannot only claim, I cannot only conclude. I, in the between, I have this commitment to some factual aspect of knowledge that helps to 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 produce a worldview. I think that the view of the life, the view of the world, is crucial on that. And I mean, that's why scientific journal on science education they were concerned. The community was concerned about the post-truth effect during the pandemic times. Yeah, and I think that by educating youngsters, is the most efficient way for fighting the post-truth.
I think for adults, I think for people who are grown up already, so for them, I think it's very important to keep opinion out of self. So you are not your opinions. So you should be able to switch, take your opinion, put it on different things. So you should be having that open
Of course, yeah,
acceptance.
I agree,
Yeah.
and moreover, understanding that how my own opinions are influencing the way that I conceive a fact, and because it's always a play between what I personally believe and what is objectively outside me, and if you understand minimally this interplay, maybe we can be a bit able to split them.
Yeah, I think this is something that comes tied very much in with like even psychological aspects and like uh, something that can be quite difficult to disentangle. I think at
Yeah.
some level.
And I remembered in the book that the author, the post-truth book from Lee McIntyre, he mentioned the cognitive bias that people have and then drive their, that's why it's easier to catch them and really, really hard to discatch them from post-truth because one of the bias or the Dunning-Kruger effect, that when people are not really um, when we don't have, and this is not a problem, this is a human condition. Everyone pretty much tend to be uh, willing to having strong opinions in fields that they are not a specialist. And it's natural, and we need to be aware of that because I mean, even with myself,
Like us who are talking about post-truth.
or like me talk about cosmology because I know nothing about cosmology. I don't have the responsibility of being right. I just throw ideas away, and this is a very, very Dunning-Kruger effect result, and we need to be aware of that. Also, the confirmation bias that we tend to take strongly fragments of idea that confirm our own beliefs, and yeah, those kind of cognitive. There is another one which is not on the McIntyre book, but another book, which is the heuristic availability. We tend to, our horizon is what we assess as information. And if we only read newspapers talk about violent crimes, even though the violent crimes are happening in New York or in Brasilia or in São Paulo or in Rio, and then here in Vitoria, I'm going to the beach and I was, oh my gosh, there's violent crime around. It's not around, it's away from here. But you make your, and again, the heuristic, the availability heuristic, uh, it's not a problem. It's a human condition because in terms of knowledge structure, it's always easier to make a new understanding by what you have available for you. So our availability, it's what makes our ideas. And then if we feed this availability with some sort of information, we tend to conclude not upon the reality, but upon what is available for us. This is another cognitive bias that maybe can drive people to bite the ideas of post-truth, and then once they are there, the whole the whole structure of knowledge is it's attached to that, and it's really, really. I think it's impossible to detach. I only think that by several rounds, it's a very iterative process from several years of rounds of back and forth on their own beliefs, our own beliefs, and more objective beliefs, and then we can step forward. But I think it's impossible just to separate that.
It's very painful to detach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in that sense, even as well, like bad news is more reported on in general
course,
than
yeah.
good news, right? You know, it's very easy to hear about something bad that happens suddenly than the slow progress of good things.
Yeah. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
good.
you for having this wonderful conversation and allowing us to use the studio from the
Oh, opening doors
department.
always.
Yeah, and I think we got some very good insights on things. And yeah,
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much,
thank you so
Ernani.
much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Bye bye.